Happy Mother's Day. And we are in our third week of our Curating Media series. Today we're talking about controls and how media without controls can lead to life out of control. So kind of leaning into a little bit of a parenting vein. And in a moment, I want to share a couple of interviews that I did this week with Pastor Alex and Pastor Lori to get kind of their perspectives on kids and youth and where all this media stuff lands, kind of from their perspective and their pastoral heart for our kids. So before we do that, I want to talk for a moment with you about Proverbs 31, because it's one of those passages that some people love and other people not so much. So I've heard from some moms who read that and they say, like, this just feels like a burden. Like, how am I supposed to measure up to this description of a godly or wise woman? It feels impossible, right? So I'm going to offer a little bit of perspective on it. First of all, I want you to imagine if we were trying to honor a mom today and we did so by listing, all the attributes of a mom and the things that she does. We would pick all of the best things that all of our moms do because we'd want to celebrate moms and celebrate them as, paint this picture of them as super mom, as a way of honoring and celebrating what they do. And so I think this is a little bit like that. If we took a modern list of, super mom attributes and then placed that and tried to place that as a rubric, like, hey, live up to this to every mom, that would feel also burdensome and impossible. So I don't think that's the way this list was intended to be used, as this, like, you've got to measure up to this, you got to check all these boxes kind of thing. Another thing to keep in mind is that this was written from a mother to her son. Okay, if you go back and look at the context of this passage, and I think it's worth noting it was written for men to read, like for this one son, but also other sons to read. And so I think there's something here in the nature of, like, son, don't just look at a woman, don't look for a wife just based on her physical attributes and appearance, right? But look for a woman who is godly and wise, right? So this idea of, come on, son, you need to think a little harder about who you look for in a wife. And I think that's still good advice. We want all of our young men and all of our young women to be the kind of people that are more than skin deep, right? That there's depth to them, that there's wisdom in them. And we want our kids to find spouses that are like that too. And I really think that's some of the heart behind this is, like, look for a woman who's wise, not just one that's hot, right? So that's kind of the idea here. Now, in verse 27 of this passage, there was a verse that caught my eye as it talked about the parents' role of looking over all the activities of their household. And that just popped out at me as I thought about this idea of media, because there's so many different ways that our families now engage with media. When I grew up, it was just a TV screen, and then a computer screen, but then cell phone screens and iPad screens and all kinds of screens. And there's so many different ways that we engage with media. There's video games, you name it, it's out there. So this idea of looking over the activities of our household can feel overwhelming and yet vital, right? Like, just to not do so would be to invite chaos, to invite life out of control, to invite all the things like anxiety or just exposure to things that we'd rather our kids not be exposed to, that just aren't healthy. And so how do we do this? This is what we're wrestling with today. This is what we're going to be talking about in our services today with our messages. But also, I want to invite you to listen again to Pastor Alex, Pastor Lori, as I visit with them a little bit about their perspective on media. And then you'll have a chance as a group to come around this topic and share ideas of what's worked and hasn't worked for you, and kind of your perspective on what your kids or your grandkids or kids today need from their parents and from those that they look up to. Okay, well, I'm here with Pastor Lori, who spends time with many of your kids and grandkids week in and week out, and loves our kids, invests in our kids. And so we're talking about this media thing, and we just wanted to kind of pull you in for a minute to get your perspective on our kids and this media topic.
Right. Well, I would say that like the biggest burden for me as a children's pastor is I'm watching kids try to navigate technology and media at such a young age now. You know, it kind of just is creeping in with kids getting phones at earlier ages, or just having access to their parents' phones or even their own tablets or whatever. And so they're, you know, watching YouTube videos, or they're on somebody's social media or have their own social media account, right? And so they're seeing all these things that maybe their little brains and their little hearts maybe can't quite navigate at the level that the YouTube video or even the social media things are talking about. And so it's really hard, I think, for parents to completely monitor every single thing that their kids navigating. So, you know, trying to balance, you know, when's it okay? And I said, it's like when we were growing up as teenagers and kids, our parents navigating TV. What TV shows do you watch? You know, because you got how much, you know, there's commercials that started, you know, coming on and so things. And so, you know, how do you navigate that? It's much the same as what our parents probably went through dealing with the TV.
Just multiply it out, right?
Yes, because
so
now it's access wherever they're at any time.
So maybe any ideas for parents and grandparents of, you know, ways that, you know, we're talking about kind of putting controls a little bit around this, and so maybe tips and tricks that you've.
Well, I definitely think that's something you gotta have some controls and parameters and time frames, right? When we were growing up, there was phones on the wall, so that wasn't an issue at dinner time. You couldn't have your device right with you, so putting that away. The whole family putting their devices away for dinner time or a certain time every day. I think that would be a good, helpful thing for our families. I also think, and this was just this is what Brian and I did. It worked for us, may not work for everybody, but when we didn't get our kids phones like for their birthday or for Christmas, like it wasn't a gift because it wasn't their phone. We were very clear, like, this is not your phone. We are paying for this every month. We pay for this so that you can have this phone. So at any point in time, this is going to come back to us. You know, if you're not using these phones in the way that they're intended, and the purpose that, you know, God wants you to live and things like that, then this is our phone anyway. It's not your phone, right? So we were very clear with that, and that really helped our kids to know, all right, well, they can take this whenever they want. Okay, that's right. It's not mine. So those were two little things.
All right, well, I switched sides here, and I'm with Pastor Alex now, who meets with our students all the time and is very in the loop too. He's very in the know about all this media stuff, and so we're gonna get his deep wisdom and insight on this topic of media.
Yeah, and I think you give me too much credit, really. I mean, the thing is that media is constantly changing as it goes throughout the years. I mean, a lot of us, we associate things with like smartphones. I remember when I first got my phone back in middle school, it was just a keypad. Like I had T9 and everything, and that was how I messaged. And really, this has been a huge leap since the 2000s when smartphones came out, and now media is just everywhere. I mean, I was there for, if we're talking about social media, I was there for MySpace, and then it went to Facebook. And
met my wife on MySpace.
There you go. And it just, everything moves so quickly. And that media is no different. And so when we talk about things like shows, music, social media, or video games even, what is allowed, what is permissible, it definitely changes. And then I've also noticed that we tend to allow things at a younger and younger age. I was the oldest, and so it was kind of a point of contention for me when my sibling got a cell phone much younger than I did. And so one of the things we've noticed is that because things are moving younger and younger, the consequences of it kind of also move younger and younger. So if you have something like anxiety or if there's depression that runs in your family, sometimes students can encounter those issues even younger than they might have otherwise because of this presence in their life. I think now of like TikTok. This is a huge social media platform that is very popular with students these days. Videos of entire communities that you can find, and really it can offer up new perspectives, but also sometimes provide evidence of why you should think something. And if we as parents and guardians aren't familiar with that, or we haven't equipped our kids of how to defend themselves from opposing viewpoints, then it can really get into some rough territory.
Yeah. So do you have any advice, tips and tricks, that kind of thing for for maybe a parent or a grandparent who, is of one of our youth?
Yeah, so some tips and tricks, I guess, that I would always have are, for one, be mindful. The biggest thing that I would say is to talk with your kids. Our biggest goal is to equip these youth, these kids that God has entrusted us with. We're not going to be able to be with them 24/7. And so just being able to talk to them about some of those uncomfortable and awkward things will do far more than if we just take a phone away sometimes. I would recommend putting a phone away at night. When Jessica and I got married, one of the things that we had agreed upon were just that we were going to put electronics like laptops and things, that we weren't going to allow those in the bedroom. And I think that's something that we could do when it comes to our students, is just to say, hey, listen, this is where they reside. We're going to leave them charging in the kitchen, and I'll buy you an old-fashioned alarm clock. We all have that one with the red numbers, and we can still do other things, but this tool is meant to be used in a certain way.
Might be easier if the whole family does that.
Yeah.
As far as just making it a little easier pill for your youth to swallow.
Yeah. Lead by example. I've told Oliver that, tools are not toys. And so when you don't use them correctly, they can hurt someone. And sometimes it can hurt yourself. And the same is true with our cell phones. And really, if you're watching TV or whatever it is, if we're not using them in the right way, they can harm someone else, or they can even harm ourselves.
Yep. Well, that's a good way to wrap this one up. So thanks, Alex.
Yeah.